So if we look at this handout, which those of you watching this video should come get from me when you come back to class, you see the United States as of 2009, 2010, looks like, was top. I think we've changed places with China since then. But we have on here Royal Dutch Shell, which is a gas company, in the top, in number 32, number 47, BP, another gas company, 35, ExxonMobil, 37th largest economy worldwide was Walmart. The AXA Group, HSBC Holdings. Can someone look up what that is? If I knew, I've forgotten. HSBC Holdings, number 99. But cities here also even have bigger population, bigger economies than countries. Singapore, New York, USA. Los Angeles, Paris, France. It was really eye-opening.
HSBC is an international bank.
It's an international bank, okay. That's good to know. Yeah, Sinopec, China Petroleum, Volkswagen at 92, number 92. Yeah. So 13 are corporations. Walmart, for instance, has a greater GDP than Denmark and Israel combined. At least as of the time that this was published. $34 are also cities, according to the 2018 version of this, which magically disappeared from my hard drive somehow. You can only work with what you got. Well, that's pretty interesting to me. I mean, that Los Angeles clocks in above Australia. Phoenix, Minneapolis, just as cities on their own, take in more than Sinopec, China Petroleum. So it's true that that military power is important. It is vital to a country's survival. A country's standing, though, is determined more by its economic position, and this is true. I mean, Germany, for instance, in the European Union, punches way above its weight. It doesn't have what we would consider much the U.S. by way of a military force, but they are an economic powerhouse, and they dominate that bloc in that way through their economy. They are really the lifeblood of the European Union. Another, for instance, I might have mentioned this before, the Soviet Union towards the end there, when it was getting set to collapse. They had all their industry pointed towards making weapons to use against us. And nobody was, for instance, making grain or planting carrots. You can't have one without the other. You can't be top heavy in the military and not working enough on agriculture and other things vital to supporting your economy. It might work the other way around. You could not pay much attention to the military and have a lot of economic produce and, you know, carrots and grain and things like that. So consider Japan a really great exporter of technology, microchips, things like that. The Asian tigers, other countries along that belt that produce electronics. So as I just said, military power bereft of economic power will lead to collapse. You need to look no further than the USSR. Economic power devoid of military power can lead to superpower status. I wouldn't call Germany a superpower, but I would say they are very powerful within the European Union. Probably, and I'm just taking a guess here, one of the top 20 economies in the world right now. I'm just taking a guess.
Well, that was the reason, one of the main reasons for the Soviet collapse was the fact that we were developing the Strategic Defense Initiative, and they were trying to counter our missile defense system, and they were unable to do so, so they went bankrupt.
Yep. So militarily top heavy. So force, according to liberal theorists, has become way too costly for four major reasons: the rise of nationalism and the advent of socially awakened populations, economic interdependence, meaning China will sell you soccer balls if you sell us cheeseburgers. Something like that, silly example. But we want the cheeseburgers from China, and the Chinese want our soccer balls. If we go to war or get into a conflict, neither of us get those things which we desire. Before we go there, let's define a term here. Nationalism. How would you, the class, define nationalism?
I would say it's a very country first way of thinking. Because, like, well, the obvious nationalist party I can think of is the Nazi Party. They're not really, like, they were very focused on, like, a German type of state. Like, our country first, our ideals first, that type of thing.
Okay. Is there a less extreme, you're right, but is there a less extreme example anybody could think of? Mr. Nichols?
I was gonna kind of say the Balkans during the 1800s, where they were like all kind of like nationalistic just because they were like independent from the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, no, they're very good. Is nationalism good for you? And I know I'm asking the question on top of that article you all hopefully picked up. Can nationalism be a good thing?
I think so, because.
Why?
You should have pride in your country where you are. But,
Ms.
I mean,
Terry?
not to an extreme, like the Nazis. You should be proud of where you're coming
Yeah,
from.
not like the Nazis, yes. Ms. Terry?
I feel like patriotism and nationalism, like especially in today's society, gets mixed up a lot. Where like
Yes.
patriotism is that pride for the nation, but nationalism like takes things more to an extreme and can sometimes, I feel like, more often lead to like the rise of the Nazis and just that sort of thing. Where for the Germans, like part of that nationalism came from like the resentment of the other countries for how things were left off after the First World War. And so I just think that patriotism is a more positive thing versus nationalism can go either way in extremity.
Okay. Now, let me ask something I perhaps shouldn't. The former president, was he patriotic or a nationalist?
I'd say nationalist.
Why?
Well, part of the reason is also just because I don't like him.
Okay, well, that's fair, but why do you say nationalist? Or is it just because you don't like him?
Also, just part of his rhetoric. He was very like, well, you know, his whole slogan, "Make America Great Again," is very like America first. We have to come first. Like, we don't care about the other people. We have to come first. And like America thing, it's just like America, America, America. That's just the whole point he was hammering again and again. And it was also pointed more towards a specific group instead of like the entire population.
Yeah. Okay. Ms. Terry?
I forgot to mention that I also feel like nationalism is also cutting out the parts, like only seeing the great. Like for America, like we've had a history that's had both good and bad, but I feel like people are trying to erase the bad and not see that like we made mistakes in the past and only see
Yes.
that we're an excellent nation, that we're great, and that everyone should look up to us while completely ignoring the mistakes of the past and what we can do to make it a better.
Now, yeah, the whitewashing of history is another discussion entirely. But I'd be interested to hear what the Colonel has to say. So, Colonel, the floor is yours.
Terry's on to something. I think the difference between patriotism and nationalism is nationalism tends to have a feeling of superiority to it. It's patriotism, you just love your country. Nationalism, you think my country's better than anybody else. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Okay, good. So we're not going to read that article, but I just thought as a matter of interest, you might like it. All right, we have the presence of nuclear weapons. So nuclear weapons, they make the cost of war extremely high, very high indeed. Because if we fear total destruction, then caution becomes the preferred strategy. If nuclear weapons, say, did not exist, never been thought of, nothing, what do you think, and I'm asking you to speculate, would have been the reaction of the international community to Putin's invasion of Crimea in 2014? Or let's not even get historical, really. What would we, if nuclear weapons did not exist, what would we do now on the Russian-Ukrainian border? Well, we have put our troops there.
But like, more force, like, we're not gonna play with them.
So we'd be aggressive.
Aggressive, like defensive, like let them know, like if they come, like we're coming as well.
Well, I don't know, because what you said is good too. I like what you said. I mean, aggressive or defensive, but we would react. We would be more inclined to actually do something about it in the absence of these weapons. And a change in the internal dynamics within great powers due to technology. So we have the technology now for ICBMs. We have the technology to create dangerous chemicals to be used in war. We have the technology to do all sorts of things we didn't even have 10 years ago.